Man, I'm gonna have to double check that. I've changed how my home studio works a little bit here, and for one reason or another, it's kind of done this weird thing with the audio lately where the audio disconnects on that there. I hit something and it also says Shannon Christmas Parade, so let's go ahead and clear that on out here for a moment. Do appreciate the folks there at the MLM for sponsoring us here on our Christmas Parade season, and we're getting here into basketball season as well. Okay. Now you can hear me. We're going to answer some of your questions there. Glad y'all are tuned in with us here on Mississippi Live Weather. I'm Chief Meteorologist Matt Lawpon, and obviously we are tracking some active weather on Friday. You can kind of see that lower level cloud cover fairly widespread around the region, something that still is pretty consistent with where we're at here. I'm going to go and clear off, if we can, all of the... Hold on, I don't know why that's got that lower third on there. So, oh, it's because I've got that set up as sponsor. Well, just a moment, we will clean that on up. There we go. Okay, that's a reminder of something. I think we had that set up from when we were doing our Christmas parade coverage. Now we've got this straightened out, and it only took like 2.5 minutes. Okay, so I see this is going to be a little more informal than our typical broadcasts. So, stick with us here as we kind of go through this here. I see, someone mentioned they're scared. I don't think we should be at that point with this here, but we definitely think that storm chances are going to increase as we go through the week and severe weather becomes more and more of a likelihood later on this week. Speaking to that point, we do have a severe weather risk in place for your Thursday for locations back to the west. Level 1 out of 5, and I always put this on here right next to it. Again, this comes back to the number of reports. You can see, as I have a loop going on here, the evolution on how they've adjusted that kind of getting that a little bit more. I'll bring it back to kind of the latest time frame here, kind of cutting off the southern edge of that threat for tomorrow. No real difference here in our area, and when we look at the different threats on this, I'd say wind is probably the most likely threat for locations back to the west. That's obviously for today's risk. For tomorrow's risk, western portion of our area, but there is at least a limited tornado threat here, so not impossible to get some rotating thunderstorms, but this is probably early part of probably Friday morning when that becomes a little more likely for locations closer to us. Our severe weather risk for Friday is a level 2 out of 5, involves all locations here that we typically focus on and cover on Mississippi Live Weather in the northern part of the state. And if this is something that you don't join us very often for these discussions, let's define that again here a little bit closer. My map is a little bit deceiving. The locations we also typically cover are going to be back to the Mississippi River, and then all the locations out here on the Alabama side. That's not to say that we won't do something for Jackson or for Meridian as far as tornadoes are concerned. I'll clear that off of there. Certainly we're concentrating on the northern part of the state here on this. What are we talking about? So I don't have those individual graphics that we can show you on this here because Storm Prediction Center doesn't put those nice, neat graphics out on day 3. But we expect that the area you're looking at here is kind of our concentration point for damaging winds and possibly also isolated tornadoes. Let's kind of walk through this threat here. A lot of folks want to know very specific times. I'm going to be clear here that the times are not going to be perfectly specific on this. Timing has been something that has been a little bit in flux. So that's why we're going to do more of these updates, not to scare, but to kind of let you know as things adjust and change and we hone in on exactly how this will play out. And by the way, if you're watching us on social media, before I go any further, one thing I do want to, again, mention here is that we want to, make sure that you know how you can find us. And probably the best way to do that is using the Mississippi Live Weather app. So I'm going to leave this up here on the bottom of the screen here for a few moments. It's the easiest way to kind of stay in touch with us as we go throughout the next couple of days. So the thing we talked quite a bit about last night on our broadcasts here was the moisture, the dew point. We had a front that kind of nudged through the area, kind of from north to south, kind of slipped through North Mississippi here. And you can kind of tell because there's more of these greens showing up, which does indicate moisture, but does not indicate as significant moisture as what you have for locations farther south, right? And so with that in mind, the moisture has been shoved a little bit south, and we're going to wait for that to return. This is because of a front that's kind of split about halfway through the area at this point here. You can kind of see that on our surface map. See, it puts it all the way east. I don't like that positioning on there at all. The fronts automatically draw. I would I would definitely have my trailing front kind of more back in here. But anyway, that's a different discussion. Regardless of where that is, that drier air kind of moving in with this high pressure center is the story for now. So we're concentrating then on the next wave with the storm system we have back out toward the west coast. Now this will kind of swoop through the central portion of the country, and that's again where that severe weather risk kind of plays in for locations back out there on the plains. Let's see if that'll let me load in that severe weather risk kind of on the wider shot here. SPC. Sometimes on my loop. Still learning the system here on what it will let me do. Now it's not going to let me do that. Oh, there it is, right there. So the severe weather risk again for the plains, as you can see there, and then still plains, but just to the west of us as we look toward tomorrow, and then obviously by Friday centered on us. By Saturday, that risk, we don't show one on there, would shift to the east as the system kind of runs out of a little bit of fuel. So it's really tracking and associated with this storm system back along the west coast that our main impacts fall into line. Take this out of play mode here for a moment. I'm going to kind of jump ahead and look at a couple things. First off, before we go too much further, I do want to show our severe threats graphic. This is the same graphic, exact same graphic I showed last night during our broadcasts. I'll say one more time again, download our apps. We also have an app for Roku. Search for Mississippi Live on Roku. Leave the weather off. Roku's weird, but if you just do that voice search for Mississippi Live. It'll pull it up there, and you can get our live streams on there, on your television, if that's where you feel a little bit more comfortable with watching what we do. Confidence in this, again, don't think we're high confidence on tornadoes, but I do think a couple of isolated tornadoes, definitely a possibility out of this, depending on how this plays out. Strong wind gusts more likely, not much of a hail threat. Flash flooding potential could be something going up. We will adjust this graphic by our 5 and 6 o'clock broadcast, but I would say we're still largely in line with the thinking on there. One of the things that we'll look at, kind of an early look, and this will also update by our 5 and 6 broadcast, what we call peak wind gusts here. And this kind of allows us to look at, over a period of time, just how windy it gets. As you can see today, there's not much, 10 to less than 20 miles per hour. We have the winds start picking up on your Thursday, that associated with, again, what we call pressure gradient winds. You can kind of see it on the wider shot here. It's a lot windier up there on the plains. All that air kind of heading into the center of this kind of first wave of this low pressure center. There'll be a second one that kind of comes back as well. But that's where the more significant impacts and threats are for locations back to the north and west of us on your Thursday. For most of us, though, you can see easily 20 to 30 mile per hour wind gusts without any sort of storms around. Some of these back to the west will be associated with some storms there. So this is kind of an exclusive thing we could show you on Mississippi Live weather, kind of, for lack of a better way to put it, accumulated wind. You can see in the morning on Friday, we do show a couple isolated showers with maybe in excess of 30, 35 mile per hour winds or 40 mile per hour winds. But clearly, as you can see, it's when we get into the afternoon and then into the evening that our peak threat for damaging wind gusts becomes more likely, where we do have some of these spots, like you can see that spot right there near Tishomingo County, a couple out there in Lamar County. On this projection, this is our strike model, exclusive one here on Mississippi Live Weather. Those are some spots where we're thinking damaging wind gusts. So as you can see, it's clearly not everybody, and this is just one projection at one time. Our different projections at different times are displaying different things. But the takeaway being, there's certainly kind of a preference for locations, really Corinth, the Grenada, back toward the south and east. But the thing I want to point out on this is if you watched us at 5, 6, and 10 last night, you will note that is farther northwest. I'll see if I can force this back some spots. So this would have been midday. I'm pretty sure this is midday yesterday. This doesn't tell me the time there. This would have been last evening. As you can see, a sharp shift southward on those peak wind gusts last evening. Overnight, what you have seen from Maggie this morning, kind of translation a little bit farther to the north and west. And it does not look like the morning run is all the way in yet here, unfortunately. I'm going to see if I back this up and we can catch some of that. Nope, it does not look like that run is in yet. So we're still looking at the overnight run. We'll get this one coming up here in a couple of minutes. Let me clear off those overlays, by the way. Let's go ahead and clear off that way you can stay connected with us. So anyway, point of this story being damaging wind gusts remain our biggest threat, but it's not an everybody thing, even in that regard as well. So let's look at one of these. Let's see if I get a good futurecast here that we can kind of work off of. I think we can. I'm going to find a graphic I can break. Let's see. This would be Friday 6 a.m. This is a good one here. Let's work off of this. And unfortunately, I think all these are set for 18Z. So I'm going to have to go in and kind of, nope, that's latest. Oh, okay, they're all latest. Okay. So that's interesting that I don't have that populating with data. A moment here to kind of force, I'll get out of that one. We'll try something else. Let me think. This is midday Wednesday, midday Thursday, midday Friday. So early Friday morning still there. Most of my graphics are set up so that when I come in the evenings, they are all set up perfect, and that's part of the reason why I midday one of these. I see what we got going on there. I see what's happening here. Okay, so let's pick this up. I can pick this up midday, and my model will be in there. There we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that, because I think I can show you early in the day on Friday. I'm just not impressed by what I see prior to noontime. One thing that is very noteworthy on this, as you can see here, I think our peak threat is really going to be midday, in the afternoon, and into the evening. But there will be kind of a cutoff on how far north the storms are significant, in my opinion, because a lot of times what happens here is we end up getting kind of an area where, you know, we kind of cut off some of the moisture. In saying that, one thing that immediately is more concerning is this is a lot more cellular individual storm cells by themselves than what we had looking at this last night, 5, 6, and 10 o'clock. There is still less gaps between these storms up here, north of Eupora, north of Tupelo, but there's still some gaps in there. If you look at it and you cut it down, I'm going to do that here. I'm going to cut it down to just the heavy precipitation, the heaviest stuff, and then we'll kind of add it back in here in a moment. Let's see if this works. There we are. I'm going to do this. Okay, so we'll cut this down. You can see how it's not just like a whole bunch of yellow, but it's still kind of more red dots, right? Yellow and red dots. But if you compare south to north here, we come down here south of Jackson, in Crystal Springs out here near Natchez, there's a lot larger gaps than we have in the northern part of the state. But there are still gaps up here, and that is a difference from what we were showing you last night. I'm going to go back. I'm going to show you one of our projections from last night on this. So let's see, 18Z. You can see, let's actually go, I wonder if it'll give me 12Z yesterday morning still. Nope, that's probably 12Z this morning, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so this would be yesterday afternoon, evening, and late last night. But in particular, the one from yesterday afternoon and evening, you can see how this is just a lot more, everything's kind of connected up here in the north part of the state, and it's more split up down south. The difference between this that we showed you last night and this that we're showing you now is that there's again more gaps up here in the northern part of the state. And gaps allow places where the moist and humid and unstable air can get in and get some of these storms to rotate. So I do think that this again is enhancing that rotation and perhaps isolated tornado threat a little bit, at least on our exclusive strike model here. That's what the latest kind of look at that is. Let me see if I'll force that. So I can put the stuff back on. A moment to do that. There we go. That probably would have been the better way to show it. We could still see the rain and everything else with it. Okay, so this is just one time period there and one model run, and we expect things to adjust with this going forward. But I definitely see enough there to say there are going to be some storms popping up in that 1 to 4 p.m. time period that will probably trigger some severe thunderstorm warnings up here in the northern part of the state and in central Mississippi. And I think there's enough there that we could probably have some isolated tornado warnings associated with this as these storms move in. I'm going to talk more about that here in a second, but before we go any further, now is the time to think about weather call. It's a personalized, basically severe thunderstorm tornado warning system for you. And the whole basis behind the idea here is it will let you know if you're in that place that is unsafe, right? It'll call you if there's tornadoes, if tornadoes are confirmed to be occurring. It'll call you back if there's severe thunderstorm warnings, if there's major flash flooding. It has alerts for watches and things like that. And you might ask, I've got one of these. I don't need that. Here's why you do need that. Because I've had, oh gosh, probably 20 alerts since we've been talking here, text messages, things like that. They're all silenced because I just put my phone on silent. But if a phone call comes in and it's a phone call from somebody in my do not disturb, and I have weather calls number in my do not disturb, then it would start ringing right now. My wife's phone call would start ringing right now. So the point in that is that phone calls break through the mess that are alerts. People, and you know, good, bad, or otherwise, people do complain that we do too many alerts with the app. Not everybody says that. Some people do. And so some people have silenced those. Weather call is the way around that, to make sure that you know for sure that, hey, it really is legitimately bad for my area. There's a cost with that because making phone calls has a cost. But I just wanted to point this out because there's a couple ways to think about this, and another one that we show all the time is kind of building that armor, trying to make sure there's multiple ways to find out if you're in the warning. Weather call I have at the top of the list because it is the most important, the most reliable, and the one that I think, you know, that I have for my family, the reason I don't take, you know, time to call them on the air. But the weather app does amazing jobs with the alerts if you have them on, if it's during the day. Will they wake you up in the middle of the night? It depends on how your settings are on your phone, right? But Code Red, NOAA Weather Radio, as well as the FEMA app. I think Red Cross, I can't remember if the Red Cross app does alerts. Either way, you want a whole bunch of those so that they all go off at the same time. Okay, so I'm going to leave this up there below me as we keep talking. But just the big takeaway on this for me is that I do expect, again, kind of in that time frame there, and I'll bring it kind of a little closer in here to the northern part of the state. Really, as we're talking from, 1 o'clock through the afternoon here, these are some storms trying to produce tornadoes. Now, I'll say, I think most of these are not tornado-producing thunderstorms, right? But I think a few of them could prompt tornado warnings, especially out here kind of in this area in advance. What we call out here in front, we would call this the warm sector. So this is more likely to have some of those storms trying to produce tornadoes out there. So I'd be, obviously watching very closely entire area, but location south and east of Natchez Trace on this projection, and it's entirely possible that things slow down a little bit, and that's why that risk area includes everybody that it does. But based on what I'm looking at here, I wouldn't at all be shocked to see an upgrade to a slightly higher risk level. These storms have some rotation with them, like that one we're looking at there through Oktibbeha County by around 6 p.m. or so. Again, kind of working its way closer to Columbus and eastward as we go later on into the evening. My particular model here runs out of data at that point. Give me a second. I'm going to extend that out. We'll at least get the 11 p.m. there. Just give me a second. Okay. And so there, as you can see, I'll kind of roll this back for a moment. There are those thunderstorms. The majority of what I see here are below severe limits. But we're not that close we're not that far removed from something more significant. I want to tilt the map, and I want to see just a little bit south of our area. We're going to rewind things here for a second because we start thinking of the whole list of possible outcomes on how this plays out. One of the important ones is that if this is all just a little bit farther north, what that means. As you can see here, these are still individual thunderstorms, most of which are kind of dying before they get to a level where they could produce a tornado. One near Crystal Springs moving toward Jackson is going to be an interesting one to see whether or not these down here closer to Philadelphia and Forest, 6:30, 7 o'clock, are they still strong enough to produce tornadoes up here once they get into Winston, Noxubee, or Pickens County, Alabama? I think that's completely a possibility that could end up coming to fruition on this there. So considering we haven't had a whole lot of these threats this year so far, and by this year I mean the cold season, the cool season, when we start to see active weather, now is the time obviously to be kind of thinking ahead on that. I'm going to put up a couple of graphics here as we kind of look ahead, also talking a little bit about, how to prepare, as we're getting close. And this is one of the things, when we're trying to evaluate where we're going in the case of severe weather, we need to be kind of thinking about what we have below. And I need to put a reminder on here, time for a visit. We'll talk more about that here in a minute. But as we revert back to the graphic I was showing before we kind of came into the model data, our severe weather risk, we have a level 2, And I do think it's not unreasonable to see an upgrade to a level 3 risk, possibly. And the exact colors aren't going to match, but somewhere down central Mississippi, possibly as far north as the Golden Triangle, I would say somewhere in there, there's a possibility we could end up seeing some kind of upgrade on this risk level. I don't think that happens at midday. Next update, 1:30, the time we're supposed to see that. I don't know that we're going to see that at midday here. So that's kind of the talk on that. But I want to talk about what you see directly below me here for a moment. Most days of the year, a manufactured home is just fine. But when we're talking about tornadoes, research shows the most fatalities are in unsecured manufactured homes. And the question then becomes, okay, my manufactured home has tie downs. Is it okay? The question is the quality of the tie downs, and ultimately there's still stresses that go onto the house. Wind can still get below it. So tied down or not, the reason why we talk about, a regular site-built structure is it's on an actual foundation. The bottom of it's on. There's no way to get underneath of it. I'll say my aunt and uncle had a manufactured home in northeast Oklahoma that was a lake house, actually, when I was a lot younger. And that manufactured home was actually built into a concrete pad and had a basement associated with it, as weird as that might sound. That one would have been okay, but even I would have still gotten down into the basement portion of it. So now it is Wednesday. We need to be planning to find, maybe another location that might be a little bit safer. And by that I mean, we don't have to go from I'm out in the open or I'm in a vulnerable, manufactured home all the way to I'm sitting in the dome in Tupelo or Smithville or someplace else. While that might be great, when we're evaluating what we're doing, we're just trying to move down the sheltering continuum from what's not good to something better. And so if things continue to progress, it's reasonable to say that maybe Fridays at evening that we plan to go to a friend's house, family member's house, and say, hey, let's go ahead and just kind of have an evening where we play Uno and maybe have the Mississippi Live Weather app ready to go and watching things just in case things get bad. And so it turns it into a positive social experience instead of, honestly, what kind of becomes a negative one when you start talking about severe weather. So just kind of one of the things we'll start stressing here, talking to some researchers, working on some phrasing on it, that their idea is it's time for a visit. And when severe weather happens, if we evaluate our location and it doesn't qualify with what we're talking about there, where we're thinking we have a strong structure, then maybe we go to someplace else that's a little bit stronger and have a hangout and enjoy beverages responsibly, hopefully just the clear, liquid, non-alcoholic ones. But I know when people get together, sometimes that happens. So just be smart and get together as far as that's concerned. So all of that said, I'm going to bring it back here. I'm going to look at storm rotation on this because we do expect that data to also update coming up during our 5 and 6 o'clock broadcast. Give me a second here. UH. And give me a moment to kind of dump that in. Oh, I already had it right there. Oh, we're going to dump it in anyway. We're going to use this one. Give me a moment here. So this will look at that storm rotation on these storms. Okay. And so first thing you'll kind of tell, we're going to look here at the reds. I'm going to bring it back here to kind of a normal shot. So we're going to look here for not just the reds for storms, but this shear. The shear is a way we can evaluate with our tools here at Mississippi Live Weather and say, where's the rotation, the rotating thunderstorms? That gets us one step closer to figuring out if we're in an issue where we need to shelter. And somebody mentions it there, and we do say, this is something comes from the Weather Service. We don't want to be scared, but we do need to be prepared, and that's part of the reason why we're kind of planning ahead, talking about this a couple days in advance. Okay, so we're starting Thursday evening. And we did talk about how there was a limited threat there on Thursday. If there was to be a tornado threat, it could be some of these storms late Thursday evening. I just don't see much there of significance, as you can see. Now, maybe you can make an argument for the pre-dawn stuff, but I would say this is mostly what we call elevated. Elevated meaning that the air being ingested into the storm is not starting at the surface. It's starting aloft. And that's important because it has to start at the surface in order to produce tornadoes. So these storms largely look and should largely be elevated. Now, what gets interesting is, again, as we go in the morning, a few of these storms a little stronger. Let's talk about what we're looking at here. I'm going to zoom in here, and again, positioning doesn't matter. This will change. I have this outlined where I'm putting lines around it to kind of draw some attention, but none of this is the shear. This is for me when I'm looking at analyzing this to help kind of talk through where we think there's shear that could be tornado producing shear. And so we're looking just at the precipitation and how heavy that precipitation is. I see nothing out there that even resembles any storm rotation at that point there. I'm going to go through it in the afternoon, and this is what it starts looking like when there is some. You get more of that red showing up there, right? Okay, so this tells us that while we have some heavier storms, none of those are strong enough to produce significant rotation in the morning and through maybe midday. But things could start to change as we go into the afternoon. You can already see back out there toward Louisiana, Jared Floyd out there, a friend and a person who is going to be doing something very similar to what we're doing here, part of a national weather cooperative. He'll be covering some storms out there that are rotating. And so you can check him out. If you just search for Jared Floyd there in the App Store, he will have live coverage out there. Our coverage will pick up here at the Mississippi River as these storms move into the area. One thing that I do see, even though it's not kicking out any rotations, this storm out here toward Greenwood, this one has that kind of S sort of shape there, some rotation. It has some clean inflow. That would be one kind of on the far northwest side of our more significant threat for, maybe seeing a tornado there. That's one we're going to watch. I think in the model here, I think it should pretty clearly start kicking out a little bit of rotation out of some of those. It doesn't really kick out much. So what that tells me instantly, hold on, I want to make sure we're on the same, everything here is on the same model run. Give me a moment. See, that's the problem. Let's put this on latest. That's still set to 18Z. Give me a moment. It's like, that doesn't line up. Well, that would be why that doesn't line up. There we go. Fixed that. And now let's go back and look at that. Okay, so this is the latest. Okay, again, and this is what we talked about. Positioning is different, right? By midday, we already have a couple of thunderstorms and maybe some very broad rotation showing up on that one there that eventually gets to Kosciuszko. But that's not terribly impressive. We'll go wide and we'll come in close. We're still kind of developing thunderstorms at midday on Friday, right? As we head here into the afternoon, you can see there's clearly some thunderstorms that are really rough out there in Louisiana. And these individual thunderstorms down towards central Mississippi are stronger, and a few of ours getting stronger as they move into Alabama. But these in central Mississippi are the ones that kind of based on the latest guidance we're going to have to watch. Central and south Mississippi, that's part of why I see an expansion on that higher risk level we were talking about. We'll go back to this and we'll come back in just a second. So this is where that risk area comes in, and that's why I have kind of that X on there. Looking at what we saw a moment ago, that's going to have to probably come back out here to include locations back toward Monroe, Louisiana, maybe Greenville. We're going to have to see how far north and west. Again, no guarantees they go all the way up to level 3 risk, but I wouldn't at all be shocked as we got closer if that's something they chose to do. Okay, so now let's come back over here to where we're kind of looking at this. I wonder if I'm going to have to go back in and fix. Yep, nope, that's all good still. Okay. So now up close and personal, let's kind of talk through how this is going to work out. Okay, so there's early Thursday, there's late Thursday, there's Friday morning, and this is kind of where we left it. I'm interested to see how this thunderstorm that is depicted near Columbus. That again could be a storm that strengthens but isn't tapping into the best shear. It's a little too far north to have the best instability, so it's stronger and maybe not quite perfectly in phase with everything. I'm going to go about this shot here so we can kind of see them coming in. Let's adjust it more like that. Okay. So now we're looking here at, say, 2, 3, 4 o'clock. What do I have at that point? I just have a ton of what is primarily... Let me double check to make sure this is the latest run, because that looks... That's latest. And that's latest. Okay, just had to double check that there. So this is where we talked a minute ago. While we do have some gaps in between, there's almost too much going on here. And there's a better analogy for this, but this is the one that always just comes to mind. It's like when someone says, we've got 2 great quarterbacks. No, you don't. No. You can only have 1 great quarterback. You've got 2 good quarterbacks. You either have a quarterback or you don't, right? If you're using 2, unless you're using one just for one specific moment, going in to run at the goal line, and you have a good pass for the rest of the time, you don't have a quarterback. And so in this case, we've got a ton of quarterbacks. We've got a ton of thunderstorms up here to watch, but we don't have that one that compares to, say, back out here into Louisiana. I'm really interested to see what kind of triggered that long streak there and what that one looks like, because this will give us a kind of a comparison of what the worst looks like, and then we can go from there. So give me a second. I'm going to delete out that rotation, and you can see again that's kind of the solid bow there. Yeah, I mean, that one looks deep enough. So the thing that is holding back our projections, yeah, so that was pretty decent, and then it gets up farther north, it gets elevated, and we lose some of that lower level rotation. Okay, that makes sense to me based on what we're looking at. Okay, I'm going to go Control Z, let's add that back in there. So that's how that one plays out, and that's why that looks so strong. So I think the thing that's holding some of these storms back is, do we have enough fuel to get these truly deep enough, like that one I'm looking at Tigbaha County at 2:30 p.m. to produce tornadoes? Why does that matter? Okay, so there are some times we get tornado warnings, but we don't get tornado touchdowns. And so I do think it's very reasonable. We get some tornado warnings on Friday. How far north those go, whether or not Memphis National Weather Service decides to start issuing some of these, I think it's definitely a possibility, especially for some of these out in the Delta. But I think Jackson will probably have some tornado warnings out of this. Whether or not they produce full-on touchdowns, that remains a bit of a question. Let's look a little more at this. So those storms coming up from the south are the ones we're definitely watching, and I apologize if that's kind of jumping on me. See, I just have a ton of storms down here, but the ones you have to watch are the ones, see how this one's kind of by itself there on the south side? It's got completely clean inflow. Somewhere out here, we're going to get one with clean inflow, and that's more likely to produce a tornado on whichever one that ends up becoming. And so kind of tracking that batch there, that's why it has central Mississippi with more. I'm going to talk specifically about this up here for you near Ackerman and Louisville and Starkville and Columbus here in just a second. I'm going to come back to that, but I want to show you what looks worse before I discuss what we have. So that's why I'm looking at all these places that look worse, so we can then talk back to what is you know, likely. And you see this becomes less and less out here as we go toward 9 to 10 o'clock, as we kind of lose that instability in the fuel for the heating of the day. And then that, yep, all kind of falls apart. Okay, so let's come back north here then and specifically talk very specifically about our area. So you've seen what it looks like when we have this shear, right? When it's more significant, you're in these brighter reds. Luckily, we haven't gotten to the pinks on anything tomorrow, for Friday, excuse me. So now let's walk this through the afternoon. I'm interested to see, this is probably going to be one of those that kind of kicks out one of those rotation tracks. Let's watch it, right? Yep, right there, it does. So what's going on? So it's come in really close on that. Might as well, we've got time, right? We're not covering up any kind of soap operas, anything like that. So let's talk about this. And give me a moment, I'm going to have to add in more time so that I have a greater ability to be sensitive to that. Let's actually cut time at the end. We're going to start this at, that's fine. We should be able to do that. Okay. Okay, so there's our, right there. Okay. So do you see how that's almost moving? That storm there is moving very north in comparison to everything else, right? It's moving more this direction. Most of the storms are moving that direction. So that would be more likely to have some hail with it, but it's moving that direction because it's spinning. And so that tells me we're going to get some splitting storms, some storms that do spin, and that's what this storm rotation is looking at. Well, is it a spinning storm? Yeah, it is, especially when it tries to merge with the other one near Ackerman. Now, I'm a little more interested in this other one there it has that's going to go on more on Louisville, Starkville, back toward Columbus track, because that, like the storm south, has clean inflow. There's nothing down here, right? So I would say that then puts from Guin to Columbus to Louisville out here more in the likely location to possibly see some isolated tornadoes than some other spots because I think there's fairly clean inflow, and at least one projection here has, again, a little bit more in the way of rotation. Now, what about these storms up here, right? These are still, if I delete off just that rotation for a moment, let's delete that out. You'll notice that, well, these storms are just as interesting as any of the other storms are. But the farther north they go, they start to run out of the low-level instability, so they still might be engines for really mixing the atmosphere, which is what all storms are. But by the time they move farther north, they're elevated and they're not bringing in that unstable air from the surface. It's from a layer above the surface. We've lost the heating of the day by this point. It's 8 p.m. So that would lend me to believe more wind and honestly, less of all forms of severe weather as we go later in the evening based on this and what it's kind of showing there. Still not impossible to get a tornado warning out of that, but I think it's not a high-end sort of risk, thankfully. Okay, that makes sense. So let's come back out here to our analysis graphic, analysis mode here for a second. And we're going to look at another thing. We're going to look at that instability straight on here in a minute. But I do think, again, kind of where I placed it on here, extended back to Monroe, Louisiana, I do think it's reasonable that we might end up seeing an upgrade to this risk level. That next one from the folks at NOAA comes out at about 1:30 or so. I think they probably still keep it a level 2 risk today. It'd be probably tomorrow before they went ahead and upgraded it, if not even Friday. If the location, I do think on a lot of our projections, has locked in a little bit better. So let's look at that, come back over here, and let's look at that instability. So, CPE. There's one in particular I want. Give me a moment to see if I can find it. Is this going to be it? The cool thing about the system is I've got everything that I could ever dream of showing you. The bad thing is I still haven't figured out. I have a way to have it kind of filed to look at it, but I'm still going to have to work out a better way to organize things. I want 72 hours. Let's try that. Actually, why don't I do exact time? Let's run this through Saturday morning. Let's say 12 a.m. there. And then we're going to start this on Friday at 12 a.m. That'll give us a good 24 hours to look at here. Okay, so here is that fuel. And you'll notice as we start things off here, it's pretty limited to begin. I mean, more significant than what we had last week or really had for a while. But you notice how that fuel becomes a lot more widespread here as we go through the day on Friday. And clearly there's a spot here down south, right there. Look at that in South Mississippi. That's where there's a lot more fuel. And it kind of pinches off as we go into the evening. And perhaps there's just the littlest nose there where it continues. Okay, let's talk through why this matters. And then we're going to get to your questions. I said we'd do questions. Promise we'll do questions. Give me just a minute. Okay, this will be kind of the final thing before we try to answer some of those. Okay, so let's bring it in closer. Again, this is why we don't have a significant severe weather and tornado risk overnight leading into early Friday morning. There's just not a lot of fuel. It is limited, as you can see there. There's some out there, so we're going to have some rainfall, some thunderstorms. But as we progress 7:30, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock, that's that time we started to have a few more of those thunderstorms. We're starting to get there into the oranges, so this is going up. Why? We have moisture, more of that coming up from the Gulf of Mexico, but we also have heating out there as the sun is coming out and starting to destabilize the atmosphere there. So as we progress into the afternoon, you can see there are some pockets where we start to show some of that yellow, but it's much more significant down here in central and south Mississippi, right? There's a lot more moisture. It's a lot closer to the coast, and that's where today's front comes in, right? We talked about this cold front, weak cold front, mainly dry air that's moved in today. That's shoved it down to the coast, and it's going to try returning. Some of it will return, but how much of it returns and in what quantity, and is it all the way fully up here? That's where the keys to that fuel and the tornado threat come on Friday, because as you'll note here, as we go into the afternoon, 2, 3, 4 o'clock, probably our prime time if we're going to see it, there are some little bubbles of that more unstable air. Nothing's to extreme levels. This is not a high-end risk, but that more unstable air that starts moving northward into our area. But as we go 3, 4 o'clock, what happens every night, right? The sun starts going down, we start losing the heating component to it, and so that fuel starts to diminish, and nothing has as much fuel as what we had at, say, 2, 3 o'clock by 5 p.m. But the thing to note is that you have this little channel there that's funneling up more unstable air, and sometimes below the resolution of a model like this, there's still just the right spot in the right place at the right time to keep that tornado threat going for a couple of storms. And that's where I think that threat could potentially extend there into even 5 or 6 o'clock. So I'm still saying, based on current projections out here, Houston, Amory, Tupelo, Red Bay, Hamilton, back toward Macon, for our area, the more likely locations to possibly see something. But luckily this is not a high-end tornado threat, and then again, enough fuel to maintain thunderstorms into the overnight hours as they gradually work their way out to the east. Okay, after a million times of saying I was going to do your questions, we're going to do it. But I need a drink of water first. Give me a second. Okay, so 12:52. I don't know how long that took me, but probably too long to get the questions. So let's go ahead and go through here. I'm going to roll back up to the top. A lot of highs. Appreciate Jamie. Appreciate Talia there, Donna, Deborah, everybody for watching as we got the sound and everything kind of worked out. Okay, so... Well, Twisted Jordan, maybe we'll meet someday. Probably not something very soon. So someone was asking Myra specifically about timing related to this. And so we've talked about timing. I would say our peak timing for this, I'll kind of go back to this analysis mode here so I can draw on this graphic. We'll clear that off. We'll choose a good color here. Okay, so let's kind of divide the area up, right? Come in closer. So out here to the east, okay, so I'd say prime time for most of us. And my angles, let's clear that. I don't love that angle, so let's try again. Let's go something like this. Let's try that. Okay, so timing. Nope, you can't read that. 12 to 8, right? In this zone there, 12 to 8. Out here, let's say, I'm going to try a different color. Five might be early to... late. Out here, Grenada, I mean, it could be early. And I would say out here, I would just say early. Wow. One of the things I do not like about this system is I cannot just type out text and put it on there. I have to actually draw it out, and that's, you're going to find out pretty quickly that I have the worst handwriting. So early, but I mean peak, if I'm talking severe weather threat, I don't think we're talking about much before, say, 11 a.m. So while I put early on there, let's go ahead and we'll choose just scribble that out. And for a different font, I think I can read 12 to 8 there. So let's put on a different font here. Let's say 11 to 5 might be late. All these are PM. If that makes sense. So anyway, generally timing, hopefully that kind of answers that question there. Appreciate you for asking that there. Chris mentions get weather call if you don't have it. I'll pop that on and I'll leave the timing there here in a second. But I would agree with Chris on that. Weather call is kind of like your personalized tornado warning there. Someone mentions having to go to South Haven that morning. Make sure you have the Mississippi Live Weather app. It's great. It will give you alerts, but you know, it's only as good as your data. Your data sloughs off. This isn't going to be very good, right? Weather call will call you. It does it for a fixed location, and it will call multiple numbers as far as that's concerned. So it can be you and your husband or wife and maybe one of your kids. You could do it for senior adults. Sign them up for their location and put your number in there, or vice versa. if you're a adult and you have kids that don't pay attention to Mississippi State, Ole Miss, or any of the area community college, you put their location in and you put your number in so you can call them as well and say, come on, are you doing it? So let's see here. Everybody wants to know specifically, Nash, about chance of tornado there in Phoebe. I would say certainly it is in the zone. Let's go ahead and come back out here. In this zone out here, I would say south of Aberdeen, Phoebe would be in it, extending down toward kind of actually out there in Louisiana. So I'm not going to draw exactly on here because I wanted to leave the locations for a second. I apologize that, again, I don't write well. But you can get an idea there, again, on some of the locations we're talking about. But I would say, yeah, you're in that zone where an isolated tornado is not impossible, but you're kind of on the northern end of that. So hopefully that kind of works out for you. Gabriel, hoping we don't see an upgrade to enhanced as we talk about. That's another way to say that level 3 risk there. We do think there probably will be an upgrade to that eventually. Dana was asking about an upgrade to the risk. Chances of tornado in Corinth, Tamara was wanting to know about. I do think you're probably a bit far north. There will be a tornado risk listed for you. It will probably be either a level 1, level 2 risk. There's some percentages that are a little different on that graphic that we'll show you, but you're probably going to be in either level 1 or level 2 there in Corinth. And listen, we do expect some movement on this. Now, we do cover Northwest Mississippi now. And so someone up there asking about Olive Branch, Hernando, South Haven. The tornado threat is not as significant for you, but it really comes down. Okay, I think we've had up the timing there long enough. We're probably not going to answer many more timing questions. What's interesting for you, I think it'd be very difficult to get tornadoes this far north. Not impossible. So you'll probably find yourself under one of those level 1 risks. But what's interesting is those storms it shows back there toward Monroe, Louisiana. If the system slows down even a little bit more, that then extends how far back north and west those storms will come from, right? And so you're kind of on a line that would take it up there closer to Hernando or South Haven or Olive Branch. So I think it's not impossible. You're probably here at a level 1, maybe level 2 risk by the time it gets here. I think it would be a long shot to say level 3 risk. And all these, again, if you're new to watching us here, that comes back to the number of reports of severe weather. We expect to have a very limited number of reports. Someone else mentioning it's looking more cellular. That's one of those signs that, again, supercell is a possibility there. Appreciate everyone for watching in Columbus. We do cover Columbus. Red Cross emergency app, according to the North Mississippi Storm Chasers, does in fact have alerts in it. Appreciate that, James there. Someone else mentioning be prepared, not scared. That's good. Okay, so someone mentioning that they have a little girl out there, and you know that their little girl lives in a mobile home. You know, we have to have those phone calls, those conversations, and maybe get folks together at our house if necessary. Kind of host that. Linda's saying, tried several times, sign up for the NextGen app. It keeps telling the phone number must contain 10 numbers. I don't put the dashes or anything in the numbers in. Linda, email me specifically, matt@msliveweather.com. I'm going to reply back to your comment here because I want to make sure that we do this. And I don't have time to help every single person get logged in. There's a lot of other things, but I would like to try to, if you absolutely can't figure it out on email, we'll see what we can do. So Linda, email me at matt@mslive. See, I didn't spell it right. msliveweather.com. I said that I type better, and clearly I don't. Okay, I'm going to have to come back up, find where we were in the questions. So give me a moment as I do that there. Appreciate everybody. Big cuz there for calling me out. Appreciate it. I wasn't throwing shade. I hope I wasn't throwing shade. No intention to throw shade on anybody. Friday afternoon, evening, everybody kind of helping out. Ackerman-Starkville still has most potential for tornadoes. I would say there's a zone for the locations up here in North Mississippi that we cover. From really, maybe northern Lowndes, southern Monroe County, down out here, kind of west to south of Winona. It just depends on how far north and west we can get those storms to kind of start going. If we have a fairly warping fairly warping, fairly open, warm sector for moisture to get in there. That would then enhance that chance a little bit more. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking there, Elizabeth, on that as well. River was asking, saw some rotation track over Franklin County latest run. Does that mean tornadoes are possible anywhere, even if they're more likely toward the south? Okay, possible and likely are different things, right? It is possible that you win the lottery. It's not likely, right? So as far as likelihood is concerned, where we see those rotation tracks, they're looking for storm rotation, and it takes the analysis that we're doing here to say where that storm rotation is possibly one rotation that could produce tornadoes. I really think there's going to be a northern cutoff on how far north that's the case. But on Wednesday, when we're looking toward a Friday threat, I'm not throwing out locations yet. If this were day of, and that projection was what I was looking at the day of, yeah, I would say that it's a lot less likely and probably not going to happen up here north of Tupelo or Franklin County or up north of Grenada. But this is Wednesday, and we've seen this trend a little bit farther back to the north and west. So it's still a little early to start throwing out locations. So I would say, River, that Franklin County is still in the mix on this for sure. Am I going to be wearing my suspenders on Friday? Yeah, I'll be in a full-on suit on Friday. I just spend most days in a white t-shirt and jeans, so I threw this on so it wasn't just white t-shirt and jeans. I did that before, and somebody was like, ooh. So, Devon, hopefully that answered that. Hottie Toddy, Nate go forth 24 there on YouTube. Yeah, I know a lot of folks excited for the big game coming up on Thursday. Interesting that they will probably be cooler in Arizona than we are here in Mississippi, but that's one of those signs about severe weather. Red Bay, Belmont, up there obviously near Franklin County. Certainly odds are greater south, but it's too early to rule you out. The odds are much, much greater south now, but again, we expect locations could see that translate farther north. Same thing I would say again for Fulton, greater to your south, but it's too early to rule anybody out, and especially if you're in the yellow area at this point here. So it looks like we might need to do like a quick overview, and I could probably do a quick overview here in a second. How early for Grenada? We talked timing a little bit ago as well. Someone said it's better than them writing on a computer. That's not true. I'll bet your handwriting is not as bad as mine. Somebody said it's not April. Chill out. I understand that people have different tolerance levels for severe weather. And I do note that people that have seen impact firsthand obviously have a low tolerance for really any kind of severe weather because they understand what it's capable of. It's part of the reason men are more likely to go out there and look on the front porch. Yes, we do that because we're trying to size up our opponent to a certain extent. The opponent will win, but I understand that there are different tolerance levels people have. While we're doing this here, I'm going to go ahead and put up the QR codes for how you can kind of stay connected to us, how you can download the app if you're on Facebook and YouTube. Looking through again some of the questions here. So the areas, if we were to see an upgrade, based on, again, purely what I'm seeing today, and we will probably not see an upgrade today. It would probably be either tomorrow or Friday before that happened, early Friday morning. But certainly closer to the center of this, it does end up making a bullseye to a certain extent, but I'd be keeping Canton, Jackson, Brookhaven, out toward Monroe, Louisiana, kind of all in this zone. But we're really doing a lot of analysis on one model, and we're going to get all of our good high-resolution models over the next 24 hours. They start coming in. So we're still fairly far out looking at this, if we're being completely honest. Okay, what do we see here? What about wind speed? So we talked earlier about wind speed. Wind speed is the most likely impact, and I think we could see some strong winds out of the strongest storms in excess of 60 to 65 miles per hour. Not impossible to get a 70 mile per hour wind speed out of it, but probably it doesn't look like an extreme wind event out there at this point here. Storm chasers talk to me, about the fact they're going to be ready, and we will do some testing of some equipment, I think, coming up here a little later on. So I'll go ahead and message him back here in just a minute. Okay, what else we have here? Going down our list, We talked a little bit about those independent tornado risks there. That was me doing that. Do I think Rebels or Canes? It's that old, do defenses win championships? Defenses win championships as long as you have enough offense to overcome the opposing offense. I think the Rebels have gotten theirs at points in time during the year. It's just a matter of whether they can really kind of line it up in time. You know what? Why not? Let's do Will's winners here for a second, and I'll get all lined up and ready to do everything. Our Will Kohlmeyer. Let's see which one of these is Will's winners. We did a sports segment on this yesterday. And we'll let the man talk about it. I think that probably will do a good job. So give me a second here. We'll hit that, and we'll be back, and we'll kind of wrap this up in a minute. Okay, 2 days to go until the big matchup. We know everybody is excited, at least Ole Miss fans, just crazed almost about this. Our Will Kohlmeyer joining us as the playoffs continue. Well, it's almost game day, and we know everyone is excited, at least Ole Miss fans, extremely excited about this next leg of the playoffs. With me is Will Kohlmeyer. And Will, obviously, this is one of the biggest runs a Mississippi sports team has been on in a long time.
Well, that's exactly right. In fact, you got to go back to 1996 if you want to take a look at this kind of run when Mississippi State's men's basketball program made it all the way to the Final Four. So, but for football, yeah, nobody's had this kind of run, and it is very exciting, obviously, to be an Ole Miss Rebel. A lot of neat storylines in this one, and I don't want to slight the defense for Ole Miss because in the second half, they were legit last week against Georgia, Matt. Georgia was 0 for 7 in third down conversions. But I think the most intriguing matchup in this one is Ole Miss's offense against that salty Miami defense.
Okay, so what is it going to take for them to get over the hump, to win, and make it to the championship game?
Well, let's just see how that Ole Miss offense with Trinidad Chambliss leading the way. He is a magician, no doubt. Georgia's defense will attest to that. So I touched on it a little bit earlier, but Miami's defense is only giving up 13 points a game. That's top 5 in the country. But when you look at Ole Miss's offense, Trinidad Chambliss and that Rebel offense, they're in the top 5 when it comes to total offense and passing yards per game. They're right at 500 yards of total offense, almost 320 of that through the air. So something's got to give. You got a extremely elite offense for Ole Miss against that defense that's extremely stingy for Miami. I mean, they've already hurt Texas A&M's and Ohio State's offense feelings, not to mention the entire team. So I think it's going to come down to if that Ole Miss offense, and they're scoring 38 points a game, and they are going to score, and just to see maybe if Miami's offense can score enough to outscore that Ole Miss offense.
Absolutely. That's our Will Kohlmeyer joining us today. Thank you so much for your analysis, and certainly excited about the game.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Looking forward to joining you again to talk more about this matchup because it's going to be a marquee matchup to say the least.
Y'all, I did some really great stuff I didn't show you. My gizmo didn't work right. Oh well, not every gizmo is going to work all the time. Okay, let me back up and I'll go through all the great stuff I just said, and hopefully it will be good. First thing as far as that's concerned is this. This graphic here is the one we showed you a minute ago. Let's kind of clear off that stay connected stuff on the bottom there, assuming that graphic worked. Yeah, that worked. Oh well. Okay. So one of the things I tweaked last night, I made it to where I don't necessarily see what you see directly in front of me. Instead, I see what I'm seeing here at the home studio. It's because when I was seeing what was coming back from the studio last night, I had about a 1.5 second delay. And I'm like, that's too long, because if I'm trying to point at something, I don't actually hit it. And then I changed it to where now I see only what's in here, and I had to look over on a monitor over there to realize that I had Will up all that time. I'm sorry about that. Let's give you the recap, and then we'll wrap this up. So tornado threat, I could argue to take this up another notch, maybe up to a medium level there. I still think brief spin up tornado, the most likely impact we end up seeing out of this here. Wind, I'd say we're keeping this a medium there, so maybe this one goes up a notch, this one stays the same, not expecting the big lines of wind to kind of move through here. Hail threat we're keeping fairly low, and flash flooding threat we'll say is possible. We'll probably keep it at medium, maybe come up a level. And then the severe risk area that we're watching, it's a possibility we could end up seeing, we could potentially end up seeing an upgrade. Let's take this here to some locations. Kind of bring up this graphic. Apparently my data is not happy at the moment. That's fun. Oh no, there it is. I just have the, for one reason or another, I have my, oh, I understand why, because I have a different graphic here. We're pointing a cloud cover, so no wonder it wasn't looking right. Okay, so here's our severe risk area, and I could argue for maybe an upgrade somewhere in the middle. I'd say it's too early to do that. I think there's still going to be some movement on the most intense areas here, and so that's the reason why I think we'll probably see, if we see an upgrade, it'll probably be either tomorrow, maybe even midday tomorrow, or it's going to end up being on Friday morning before we see an upgrade to a higher risk level, a higher concentration of reports associated with this. Timing, I would say for most locations that are watching us, the most locations that see impact, I would put timing for our area. I'm going to zoom it in so I don't, imply something too terribly wrong for other locations. Somewhere in the neighborhood of around, let's say, 11A through peak timing, 8P, but the reality is that it will extend beyond that both directions depending on where we're at. But that's kind of our peak timing there, and honestly true peak timing more like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock. All right, so our next live broadcast will be coming up tonight at 5 o'clock. We'll have updates, and myself, our meteorologist Gabe Maynard. It'll be a little more refined than this. We'll keep it a little more concise than this. Here in the Room to Room Weather Center, we're updates, of course, 5, 6, and 10 during the weekdays. And if you haven't checked out our meteorologist Maggie McCauley, she does an amazing job. She's on 6:37 and 7:30 a.m. here from the Room to Room Weather Center. We appreciate y'all for sticking with us here on Mississippi Live Weather, and we will appreciate your support, and we'll talk to y'all soon.